Hey everyone and welcome. Today we're going to dive into something really fascinating, the science of us. Yep, we are getting to the very foundations of psychology, figuring out what it is, where it came from, and why it's so incredibly important in our world today. So, you ready? Let's get started.
Really think about it for a second. Have you ever just watched people and wondered, why does one person absolutely thrive under pressure while another person just crumbles? Or why are some of us total social butterflies and others would rather stay in with a good book? These aren't just random quirks of personality. These are the exact kinds of questions that get psychology going.
So if we're going to get official, here's the definition you'll see everywhere. Psychology is the scientific study of behavior and mental processes. Now, let's break that down, because those words are key. Scientific, that means we're using rigorous, proven methods, not just, guessing. Behavior, that's all the stuff on the outside, everything we do that you can actually see. And then there's mental processes. And that's the tricky part, right? That's our inner world, our thoughts, our feelings, our memories.
Okay, so here's the game plan for today. We're going to start with that core question, what is psychology? Then we'll look at its scientific roots, take a little journey through its history, see how it's used today, and then we'll bring it all home and look at its story right here in India.
So, let's jump right into that big question. What does psychology actually study? It really boils down to two huge domains, everything we can see happening on the outside and that super complex world that's buzzing away on the inside.
Yeah, this slide breaks it down perfectly. On one side, you've got overt behavior. Think of it as anything you could record with a camera. Talking, walking, laughing, crying, it's out there for the world to see. But then, on the other side, you have the covert mental processes. This is the invisible stuff, all the thinking, remembering, and feeling that happens behind the scenes. And honestly, the biggest challenge for psychologists is figuring out how to scientifically study that hidden internal world.
And that brings us to an absolutely critical point. Psychology isn't just about sitting around and having philosophical chats about life. Nope, it is built on a solid, rigorous scientific bedrock. And that's what really pulled it away from its philosophical roots and made it its own thing.
So what gives it the right to call itself a science? Well, this quote really nails it. It's all about the method. Psychology is obsessed with gathering data systematically, carefully watching, carefully recording, often under really controlled conditions. The whole goal is to be objective, to get past our own opinions and see what the evidence actually says.
Now, the secret sauce behind this whole scientific approach is a big word, empiricism. But the idea is actually super simple. It just means that the best, and really the only way to get real knowledge, is through our senses, through what we can actually observe and measure. So in the world of psychology, hard evidence from an experiment is always going to beat a gut feeling or an old belief.
Okay, so we've got the how psychology works as a science. So now let's get into the what. The different big ideas that have shaped what psychology even looks at. And trust me, it's not a straight line. It's more like a history of brilliant and sometimes clashing ideas that we call the schools of thought.
And our journey has to start with this man, Wilhelm Wundt. You've got to remember the year 1879. It's a huge deal because that's when Wundt set up the very first lab dedicated to experimental psychology. This was it. This was the moment psychology put on its lab coat, stepped out of the philosophy classroom, and into the world of science.
And just look at how things exploded from there. After Wundt, you have William James over in America saying, hey, it's not just what the mind is, it's about what it does for us. Then along comes Sigmund Freud, who takes this wild deep dive into the unconscious. But then, and this is a total 180, the behaviorists show up and say, forget the mind, we can only study what we can see. And after them, the humanists bring the focus right back to us, to our potential for growth and our free will. What a ride. I love this table because it's like a story of different people trying to understand the same thing with totally different tools. Structuralism tried to make a map of the mind's basic parts. Then functionalism looked at that map and asked, okay, but what is this map for? How does it help us survive? Psychoanalysis just went exploring off the map entirely, looking for hidden caves and treasures. Then behaviorism came along and literally threw the map in the trash, saying forget the map, just watch where the person is walking. And finally, humanistic and cognitive psychology picked that map back up, with the humanists focusing on the person holding the map and the cognitivists using new technology to make the map even better. See, each school gave us a new, valuable lens.
Okay, history lesson over. Let's fast forward to today. Because now, psychology isn't just one big thing.
It's branched out into tons of specialized areas, and each one is taking these core principles and using them to solve real-world problems.
So, for example, when you hear psychology, most of us immediately think of clinical psychology, right? And that's a huge and important part of it. But oh my gosh, it's so much more. You've got health psychology, which looks at how our minds affect our physical health. You've got school psychology, helping students learn and thrive. You even have forensic psychology, which plays a massive role in the criminal justice system. It's everywhere.
All right, now for something really special. Let's zoom in and bring this whole story a little closer to home. Because while a lot of the early names we hear are from Europe and America, psychology has its own rich, important history right here in India.
And that story has a very specific starting point. The year was 1916, and the place was the University of Calcutta. This is where academic psychology was formally established, planting the seeds for everything that was to come across the country. And what's so cool is that psychology in India actually grew out of philosophy departments, which shows just how deep its intellectual roots are here. You had amazing pioneers like Girinder Shekhar Bose, who didn't just copy ideas like psychoanalysis, but actually adapted them to fit the Indian context. And that strong foundation is what allowed for world-class institutions like NIMHANS to be built, and why there's such a vibrant community of psychologists in India today.
Okay, let's bring it all home. If you just remember a few things from our conversation today, make it these. Psychology is a science that studies both our inner world and our outer actions. It's got this rich history of competing ideas that made it what it is today. It relies on real evidence, it offers a ton of different career paths, and it has a really significant and growing history right here in India.
You know, we've really just scratched the surface of this incredible field. So I'll leave you with a question to chew on. Now that you've seen the big map of psychology, what's the one area? Is it memory, emotions, social behavior? What is it that you're most curious to explore next? Because believe me, the journey is just getting started.